opportunity for business in the consumer data, right, is getting that real-time information on the health of their business, whether it be the financial health of their business or, some of the examples we saw in the CDR showcase in Sydney yesterday, about choosing the right energy provider. Making sure that they're availing themselves of, cost saving measures, wherever they can. And, CDR sort of provides that data for them to make, better informed decisions. So I think it's a real win for small businesses, any businesses, once they can access it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So looking back at CDR Month, obviously there's been lots of events. Trev, you were on a panel yesterday at a showcase event, but I'd be interested to hear all of your thoughts on this. Just given the things that you've all been involved in the last month, what would be each of your biggest takeaways about CDR, either new ideas, but also the feel of the place, the feel of the industry, and what's going on? Like a key takeaway from each of you would be great. But starting with Trev.
Well, I think for me, the key takeaway, especially post yesterday, was how far the industry's actually come since CDR. I was beforehand, I was speaking to Simeon around. It feels like CDR has been around for a while, and that's potentially also because everybody in this room has been very closely involved with CDR since inception. And yesterday was kind of like a kind of a line in the sand period where like, wow, look at it's evolved significantly. There are still issues, of course, but the quality of data continues to improve. That's being returned by the data holder. The actual ideas and innovative products that are coming out in market are actually pretty interesting. And I think it's actually really worth mentioning them. Like the list of businesses that were there that presented yesterday we saw Wave, which was like a payment provider that uses open banking data. We saw Greener, that uses open banking data to help consumers work on their carbon footprint and suggests better products for them to use that's in line with like a more sustainable living. We had Sherlock, which I thought was really interesting, which is a what do we call it? You got to help me out here, guys. The a broker. Thank you. That's loan brokers, and kind of helping them identify like avenues for kind of remortgaging for the consumers. So this is good for the brokers and good for the consumer. We had WeMoney, which is really interesting, which that one's probably been around the longest and matured the most. And that's where they take all consumers, the consumer banking data, and aggregates it in one place and gives them kind of a holistic, financial health look, and also suggests things that they can do to, for example, become debt free or save money, etc. And I actually signed up for it this morning and thought there was a ton of amazing things, but also it made me extra critical about some of the things from CDR that we still very much need to improve. And then we had Stay or Go and Zemble. Unfortunately, I missed those two at the tail end. But for me, I was just kind of seeing all this stuff, all the I guess more boring CDR work that's been done coming to life, and seeing what kind of value it's providing consumers and businesses. It's super interesting, and I feel like even though I'm not directly the parent of CDR, I feel like it's growing up, and we're seeing some fantastic things.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like some real momentum in the room yesterday from the photos and videos as well. So that's fantastic. Mathew, key takeaway from the CDR month for you? You're on mute there, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, good reminder. The one thing that stood out for me, I guess, like as a theme that's important and was part of CDR month, like from what we were trying to do, was just bringing people together to learn together, the power of community and coming together to figure stuff out. And I think CDR really represents that in so many ways. Like, it's such a big, ambitious initiative from the government, and it just requires people to come together and figure stuff out and drive forward that kind of shared learning. So I think that, the month, what we saw with the month, we really saw lots of different organizations coming together, as as 3 partnering industry associations, we tried to create a platform, and we had a whole bunch of other organizations create these satellite events, and Zepto being one of them for this CDR Month Reflections webinar. And like that's a testament to the maturity of the ecosystem to some degree, but also just the fact that there's a lot of shared interest, and people care about seeing this thing actually be successful. And it's only been 3 years. We're coming up to that anniversary day now, and which I think is tomorrow. And I think that for me, that's the big takeaway, how important that is. And one of the things that we intended as an aim of the month was to demonstrate how, and provide an opportunity to see how open innovation, bringing people together, de-siloing like the way we learn, is actually that flywheel that can accelerate that potential really being realized.
Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds like a key theme here is, sorry, Trev, is sort of coordination, industry coordination and momentum. But we'll cut back to Trev, and then Simeon, I was interested to hear your thoughts on the week and on the month, and if there's anything sort of, I don't know, you learned that was unexpected about where we're at and where things are headed.
Just a quick sidebar.
Yeah, look, I thought it was a really, I thought it was a really interesting month. We've been, for those of us who have been part of the CDR journey, over the past sort of 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot of focus on the process of CDR. That CDR is the enabler of this, control, choice, and competition. And so it's been really interesting to hear some of the outcomes. How are consumers being provided greater choice, greater competition through the consumer data, right? And we saw examples of that through, as Trevor said, the one from is it Sherlock from South Australia, enabling people with mortgages to find better deals for them, and such a timely innovation when as interest rates rise, if you're paying too much, then you want to get off and save that money where you can. Also to see innovation out of WA with WeMoney and that personal finance management. And helping people get control of their finances so that they can make better decisions and take control of their financial lives. I think what we've seen over the journey is some of that innovation that CDR was sort of the promising, and we're seeing more of that, dare I say it, on the sort of retail consumer side than we have on the small business side, because there still remains a couple of barriers in the rules that prevents small businesses being able to participate more fully. But one of the ones that I really did love was Zemble, and how they're helping small businesses analyze their electricity use and help them make informed choices. Again, helping the businesses save money, but also helping them make choices, in line with, their carbon footprint and so forth. So we're starting to see some good innovation, but it feels like there's a lot of energy, a lot of promise, and just a few things to sort out to really unleash the power of CDR in Australia.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Awesome. Trev, did you want to make some further comments?
Yeah, please. Sorry, I think there's just a tad bit of a delay making it a bit awkward, but I'd agree. Like, one thing that really stood out to me yesterday as well is just the amount of energy in the room. There were circa 200 people in there, and the level of energy and optimism and ideas and innovation that was like swirling around that room was, you felt it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's
that's great. So like
latency here. Sorry, Gabe, but we've got a latency issue. I was just going to say, there's the contrast, and it got brought up in the conversations yesterday at the showcase event, and has, in lots of different shapes and forms, even the stat review called out just the fatigue that people are facing, and something to recognize is, we Australia launched this initiative in 2020, and we had a pandemic going on, and there was so much happening. And the fact that we've gotten it to where it is actually just a huge testament to human resolve and like people coming together to figure stuff out. And the fact that we've got that level of energy, Trevor, like that we saw in the room at the event is, it's just testament to like people really believe in this, and that they're excited about what we can do and progress things into the future. And I think that's like it's such a great position to be in, and congratulations to everyone that's kind of contributed to where it is today.
Yeah. So that's really good. And sorry for the delay there. We might have to wait for a couple of seconds after we finish speaking to avoid cutting each other off. But just it seems, and what I'm hearing here is that there's a lot of positivity, a lot of energy, a lot of momentum, and some really, really good ideas, which is fantastic. But let's try and I think also talk about some of the challenges and how maybe they can be overcome in order to make CDR a really prevalent thing in Australia. I mean, I think the CDR month comes at a pretty critical time. The government recently announced that it would pause the expansion of the CDR into new industries that it was going to expand into, like telecommunications and superannuation. And it is instead decided to, I suppose, double down on the industries that it's currently in, invest more in the potential for action initiation as well in those current industry sectors. So, I'd be interested to know what you all think about, why are we having some challenges? Why is the government maybe pausing it a little bit here? And maybe start with you, Simeon, on what can we do to increase the uptake of CDR?
Yeah, certainly. And look, I think it's probably testament to Australia's ambition that we probably chose the most complicated sector to begin with, being banking and financial services, essentially. Incredibly complicated, but I think as Aussies, we go, show us a problem and let's get stuck into it. And so I think it's from my point of view right that we just sort of slow down and make sure that we get that right, because the opportunity for the consumer data right is that as it grows across the economy, that its power and its utility is multiplied by the number of sectors that join in. And so making sure that foundation is right before extending it on to additional sectors is really vital. From an Intuit QuickBooks point of view, obviously small businesses are our primary customer, and so we see great opportunity and great value in the CDR for them. At the moment, there are rules around derived data and consent and deletion that don't reflect how small businesses currently use their data. And so until they do, there's going to be barriers to that full participation from SMEs. And so, there was consultation done in September last year, which looked to improve and incentivize small business participation. I think once that sort of goes through, then there is a use case for over 2 million small businesses that use accounting software products. And as we've seen in the UK, small business has led the adoption of the open data or open banking over there. And so I'd expect, we're probably not that dissimilar to them. And so if we can remove those hurdles for small business, then we'll probably see that trickle down from small businesses to the small business operators, to their employees, and so forth.
Yeah, great. And we at Zepto actually did some research a couple of years ago into some market research into consumer data right and uptake and what people would be interested in or not interested in. And one thing that we found, a key finding from that research, was that 18% of people were not comfortable with sharing their personal data with third parties. Now, since that research has been done, we've had the Medibank data breach, we've had the Optus data breach. I can't help but think that that's got something to do with this general hesitancy to really embrace this. Mathew, do you think that's right? And do you think there are other issues that we should be focused on as well?
Yeah, look, I mean, changing consumer attitudes towards like data privacy and things like that are, they're super relevant to what's taking place with CDR. The recent spate of data breaches obviously creates way more anxiety around data sharing for consumers, and it takes a while for those trends for people to kind of trust something when it comes to technology, particularly with those things influencing people's decisions. And I think there's this interesting tension around like educating the consumer and things like that, and it came up yesterday at the showcase as well. It's like one oversimplification of this, but one side is like, we just need the use cases, give people the tools, like let them get the outcomes, and they don't need to know about CDR. And I absolutely agree. Like, my wife has no interest, and there's no value in teaching her about the plumbing, API calls, like the standards development. That's it's not relevant. But there's also a component that, like, the trust mark of CDR, which is an important element. People need to recognize that, like, it is a method of sharing data that people are unfamiliar with. So I think that requires the use cases to build that awareness. But I also think there's a little bit more that can be done to, boost consumer awareness, but also consumer involvement. I think it's been a bit of a missing component. We plugged on the CX guidelines in the standards and stuff after the technical and data standards. And we probably aren't involving the consumer advocacy bodies in the right way either. And it tends to be, unfortunately, a little bit adversarial. And there's lots of reasons for that that we could dive into if it's of interest. But yeah, I think to accelerate adoption, we probably, my view is we shouldn't be waiting for the government to basically say go. Industry coming together and even coming up with candidate specifications and standards and APIs to like do stuff, have multilateral agreements like in place between different players, like actually drive some of that collaboration and co-opetition. That's actually going to accelerate what we've got now, but also kind of accelerate past just the whole of sectoral designation as well, which I think that's where there's a huge amount of value, and we'll see extraordinary potential realized as a result.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Mathew. We've got a question here, one that wants to jump in and answer this in the chat box. How can we ensure as an industry that slowing down in CDR doesn't mean that the government loses a sense of urgency in fixing the existing issues that are preventing take up at scale? So that sort of balance between expanding, but then fixing and embedding and consolidating. Anyone want to make any comment on that?
I can just jump in quickly, and then I think Simeon or Mathew would probably be best positioned. But one thing that I did notice, and through my experience, I've recognized as being like a hallmark of something very good when it comes to building better things and innovating, is that at all the conversations I've been in, everybody's been very open at talking about what's gone well, but also what's gone like not so well, and what are the things that we do need to fix. And I'm tremendously optimistic because of that, right? The conversations aren't like, oh no, everything's perfect now. We've done a lot of heavy lifting. We're just going to go forward. Now the industry is very self-critical and looking at it, going, okay, well, you know what? The consent process is probably way too long and way too complicated. Potentially the amount of the wall of text that a consumer needs to see and go through in order to finally get to their final destination, probably a bit too much and needs to be revisited. So I think at the very least, at least there's that recognition and agreement broadly that there's still more to be done there, and the job is not yet done. How do we then continue with government and the pause, et cetera? I'll pass over to Simeon or Matt, who might have a much better answer than I do. Sorry, guys, I'm just
thanks, Trevor.
giving you the hard part.
I've got a view that I'm happy to offer, and one that's probably more from the lobbying and engaging with government side is the importance of a united front. And I think just the importance of even the three associations that came together to put on CDR Month. We had FinTech Australia, FData, and the AAAA. It's hard enough to get consensus in an association with multiple members who have aligned but sometimes separate interests. So to have that aligned interests and that united front across the three key industry groups is really important. The other one I think is forming unlikely coalitions that maybe when you're making representation to government, going in with some of your competitors and going, listen, what we want this not just because it's going to improve our business, but ultimately because it's going to benefit the customer, it's going to benefit the Australian consumer, and so that's the policy outcome that we're working for, and so creating unlikely alliances, coalitions, presenting a united front to government, and really keeping that engagement up. I think Jody made a comment in the chat as well. Using this month to then really sort of talk about the fixes. What are the solutions that can be made now that would make a difference immediately? And I think pretty much everyone in the room yesterday is waiting for V5 of the rules, which would make a significant impact on the uptake of CDR in Australia.
Yeah, that's great, Simeon, and it does touch on this. What seems to me to be a bit of a tension here when we're talking about the expansion of CDR and really driving it forward. You've got industry. You guys have all been at these events, and it's super pumped. It's super exciting. Lots of ideas and investment. But then you've got government who has to obviously put in place the frameworks to make CDR a possibility and to expand it into new industries. But it might be looking at this and going, well, we want to see more use cases. We want to see more of a reason to invest money because they're obviously investing taxpayer dollars into this. So there seems to be that tension. But what I'm hearing, it seems, is that the way forward is for industry to come together to keep driving those use cases and effectively the business case as well for government to continue to roll it out. And then obviously for investors to put their precious resources into product development in order to actually drive us forward so consumers can then take that up. But Mathew, I'd be interested to hear anything from you on other things that industry can do to really get in front of government and to really justify this as an industry in Australia, the consumer data right. Anything more that we can do that we're not currently doing?
Yeah, I think this probably builds on what Simeon was saying as well, and it came up in the roundtable discussions that we had in Canberra as well. And Dr. Anton Didenko from University of New South Wales said that for these ecosystems to be successful, you kind of need that united voice coming from the non-government stakeholders. And that's required to kind of do that, help the government see that, okay, well, yeah, we need to address these issues. And I think, we don't necessarily have that. Like this industry, if we can call it that, is, it's just emerging, as a reform. There's a whole bunch of use cases that to some degree we can't even imagine, because it actually requires a bit of a playground. Like you need to get in and play with this stuff. And we don't, where is the CDR playground? Like there's a lot of companies and intermediaries, for instance, that have sandbox environments. The DSB, ACCC has a sandbox environment. But it's still if you're a social entrepreneur, where do you go to play, and figure stuff out? And how does that help accelerate learning? So we don't have those types of things at the moment, be that kind of single voice to drive forward and create the urgency and weight behind, get the V5 rules out now. We don't necessarily have that kind of united voice across industry. It's still pretty fractured. And then just the playground side, I think that's a pretty important component. Like the idea of a holistic regulatory sandbox that is both that from enables policymakers and regulators to learn, but also the entrepreneurs to get in there and kind of actually pilot out things and even play with synthetic data to actually demonstrate that these things can work. Innovate on the consent model. How do we have meaningful consent in a way that has the right level of positive friction, and removes the unnecessary friction that's necessary. Like, where do you actually go to actually like create and prototype and explore that without breaking the rules? There's no place to do that. So I think those types of things are necessary for us to really accelerate and create that flywheel of adoption and innovation.
Well said.
Yeah, cool. No, that's really yeah, and I think industry coordination. I think we've seen this across the fintech industry, the importance and the value of having industry representation through whether it be the Tech Council of Australia or Fintech Australia, in order to get the views of especially smaller players represented in front of government and really try and get those views amplified. Something that is very much easier for the institutional players certainly in the financial services industry, but obviously across all of these different industries which CDR touches. So I think that's a really big point and something that we can all work together and focus on. We've got about 10 minutes to go, and I thought maybe it would be good to spend that time focusing on where to not how to get ahead, but where it might be, where the CDR might be in the future, and maybe touching on not just necessarily existing use cases that people have seen in the last month or heard about, but the potential and what people might use the CDR for in the future. So, Trev, I might start with you. What do you think is either the best one you've heard of, the best use case you've heard of about the CDR so far, or something that one of your own ideas about how it could be used to really add value to an individual or to a business in Australia?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think there are a ton of ideas that are already out there. And there's a good chunk of this where, it falls under the things that I don't know. And to me, that's the most exciting part. When it comes to the actual, evolution of CDR, I'd be remiss as a payments company, first and foremost, if I didn't mention, action initiation and more particularly payment initiation. And I think it was mentioned a little bit before, is that, we modeled a lot of what we've done here in Australia from what's happened overseas, and in particular looking at UK. And the UK started with more of like an action initiation model, and they got uptake pretty rapidly. And I think we're going to see the same thing here in Australia once we get action initiation embedded in, because now it won't be just about, having insights from data, but also being able to automate actions and suggestions for the consumer. And I think that's just going to explode the amount, like when we think about the amount of ideas and amount of products that benefit both businesses and consumers in market. And for a basic example is if you had an application that was using CDR data and looking at all the superannuation providers out there, and ultimately it could also transfer you from one to another automatically, obviously with your consent, but you don't have to do any heavy lifting, right? Like that's pretty compelling, and you can take that across industries, and you can look at that also from a payment perspective, payment initiation, and you're seeing also with the advent of AI, right? You take quants investment quants with AI and action initiation. Potentially, you could have an AI that's moving your funds around in a place that fits your risk appetite and also increases your returns. There's some pretty exciting stuff there. Obviously, there's risk no matter where you look, but I ultimately, as soon as action initiation really comes into play, we'll see some pretty interesting stuff as well. But I just want to double down on what Matt said: regulatory sandboxes and driving towards accessibility. And you've seen that in a lot of the reviews lately from government. Accessibility is mentioned. If you do a find in a document, accessibility is everywhere, right? It's about providing this accessibility to reduce that barrier to entry, to at least allow, ideas to get past the incubation stage, is critically important.
Yeah, that's great, Trev. And I think, just from my own perspective, something that I think super exciting about action initiation is the idea of effectively outsourcing that day-to-day responsibilities which people hate doing: financial management, running your budget, choosing a bank, choosing a mortgage, all these things. I'm talking just from a financial services perspective, but that is something that takes up a lot of people's time. And in a day and age where time is more and more precious, people are put in more and more different directions and distracted in more ways than ever before in the history of mankind. I think that saving people time is a pretty big proposition, and something that, if sold properly to people and people are educated properly and understand the benefits, could really be a huge thing to drive this whole CDR forward. But Simeon, before you got dropped off there, we were just trying to discuss, to close this out, some of the really exciting use cases that you've either heard of in the last month, or that you've come up with. If you've got any cool ideas that you don't want to start a business with and therefore share here, but anything that that really excites you about the CDR.
Yeah, look, I'd echo those comments that you just made then, Gabe, about saving time. Some of the innovation that we've seen, is almost sort of replicating those time-consuming life events that we all kind of go through. That remortgaging, it's such a hassle to go through, to do all the research. I'm not a financial planner, I'm not an accountant. I need someone else's expertise to help me guide me through those things. And so I think some of the innovations that are coming out, that enable that, really, in a blindingly fast, time, that with accurate insights, are just incredible. And when I think, to small businesses, their two biggest concerns: one, getting customers, and getting paid. And I think, with the underlying sort of principles of the consumer data right, of giving choice, competition, and what was the third C? Choice, competition, and control. That the opportunities for business to gain business through the consumer data right, such as offering their services through comparison sites or other things that enable them to onboard customers without having to go through that whole data collection process again. But also, getting paid on time, and some of the innovations that we're seeing, in the payments system, whereby, that process between, sending out an invoice and actually getting paid for the work that you've done is going to be such an important, enabler of business across the economy. So I think there's some great opportunity in the CDR space, in solving those two issues for small business.
Yeah, awesome. And Mathew, what's your favorite use case?
Look, I'd have to say greener. I really like, and that was probably one of the nice little tidbits of learning. Like, the average carbon footprint of an Australian is about 15.4 tons of carbon throughout the different activities that you engage in, and it's particularly relevant to so many of the challenges that we have. Where we, as consumers, where we just choose to spend our money, what on and with who, those kind of relationships, has an impact on the world around us. It impacts our biosphere that we rely upon for survival. So using open banking data to give people an insight into that, so that they can actually shift their own behavior around where they're spending their money, so they can actually have, contribute to resolving some of this around, the issues of their carbon footprint as a result of supply chains, and how energy and fossil fuels and things like that are used. That's actually a really great use case. And I was wanting to sign up to Greener a while back, and Neil at the conference yesterday put out the VIP code, and I was like, yeah, great. I'm not on the wait list anymore. I can actually use it. And that was actually quite good. And I'll just reinforce that. I think the question was asked in the audience yesterday, how many in the audience have actually used CDR, actually gone through the consent flow? And it was only about half of the audience that kind of put their hand up. Might not be true representation in terms of sample size, but you actually have to feel it. You got to go through it. You got to have that embodied, lived experience to go, well, this is what it's about. Be that to go, oh, there's too much friction in the consent experience. Here's how we can change it. Or, wow, this is what I got as a result. This is what it enabled me to do, and the outcomes that matter, I think is, we need more of that. Got to actually use it. It helps to have that that knowledge and insight from a, put your consumer hat on.
Yeah, dip your toes in the water. It sounds like that's key here. Well, thanks, Mathew. I think that's pretty much all we have time for today, and it's been a really great discussion and so helpful, I think, for everyone listening, me included, that you've brought really to this conversation these insights from the last month, CDR month. It sounds like there's momentum. It sounds like there's certainly passion in the industry. Maybe we can work on coordination moving forward and really building out those compelling use cases. But it sounds like things are on the right track, and we look forward to having maybe a similar discussion in 12 months' time and seeing how we've progressed since now. But thanks very much, Simeon, Mathew, and Trev, for your contributions, and for everyone listening in. Appreciate you dialing in and listening to this fireside chat. And we look forward to hosting the next Zepto Connect webinar on another interesting topic in the industry.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Simeon.
Bye.
Thanks, Trevor. Thanks, everyone. Bye.